Hi everyone, it's Lisa here. I'm back today with another video for you. It's a different type of video for me. I haven't done anything like this before, and today I'm going to just walk you through some of my go-to dies, some of my favourite dies. I have a friend called Corin Wiskman who recently did a video called Ride or Dies, which was all about her favourite dies, and I'm going to link to her video in the description below. But she did tag me in and suggested that maybe I do a video showing mine, so I'm going to run through those today. And rather than just have me sit here showing you a load of sets of dies, I've got some card examples that I'm going to share with you as well. And this voiceover is live today, so I do apologise if you can hear things in the background. I've got the window open. It's a heat wave here in the UK and it's really hot in my craft room, so I need to have the window open, but you might hear a little bit of traffic. So just a quick note about dies. I really don't have loads of dies. Dies are a big investment. They cost a lot of money. The price has gone up recently. So when you buy your dies, you really want to make sure that you're going to get good use out of them. No question, I've made a few mistakes along the way, and I'll talk a little bit about those when I get to it. But I'm going to show you some of the things that I reach for often. Some of them are actually quite old dies. Most of the things I'm going to show you, in fact all of them, I'm pretty sure are still available. And also just bear in mind that when you buy dies, there's lots of other things that you can do with them. You can use them to create stencils, you can use them to emboss card, you can cut foam with them and then create stamps. So they are an investment, but there is a lot that you can do with them. So I'm going to kick off by sharing what I think is one of the biggest investments that I made with my dies, and that's my basic shape dies. So I've got some stitched rectangles. This set here is from Simon Says Stamp, and I think it was the first set that I actually bought, and this is probably about 3 years ago. And I mostly use the larger die, and it mats up onto a card that size, so you get a little border around the edge. So I use that one all the time. You can tell the packaging is really worn. I really need to get a new pocket, but I'm always using this die, and it has an inside and an outside stitched line, so it's really good if you use the positive or the negative. And you can obviously use frames as well. You can create frames with those. So that was my first set. And then as time went on, I thought, oh, I don't have a die that cuts out the size of an A2 card. And so I ended up buying the Lawn Fawn large stitched rectangle stackables, basically just to get this largest die, which again is a stitched die. And so I don't actually use these that often, and this is kind of where I think I made a mistake with my dies. And I think you really need to look around at sets of dies before you go ahead and purchase, or you do end up with several dies that cut the same size. So it is really worth checking those out before you purchase. Having said that, I do use this a lot, and my card here today, actually I'll move it a bit nearer. I've used the largest of the dies to cover the whole of the front of my panel, so I don't have any kind of, it's not a kind of matted panel that sits on top of that, and I really like it when it covers that whole panel. And I've used another die, which I'm going to come to in a second, to cut the inner part of that frame. So that brings me on to my next one. This is the Hero Arts Rectangle Infinity dies, and I think out of all my dies, these are the most, they are just brilliant value. I think you get about 12 or 13 dies in this set. They don't cut the stitching, but they cut, you've got loads of different sizes, so you can really vary your panel size, and also if you want to create a frame, you can do so many different widths just from this one die set. Even that little set there, that's great for a sentiment banner. So it's a really good value set of dies, and if you're not worried about stitching, I would say this is just a brilliant set to get and well worth the investment. And this is the card that I created with those. I actually cut a panel, so I've got the largest of the dies, which cuts the A2 size, and then I've just cut a smaller frame inside and stacked them up. So I really like how that one turned out. And sometimes I think you don't want to detract from the actual card by having stitching. You just want to have a plain frame, and so they're really good when you want that kind of look. Now moving on, I'm going to move on to my square dies, and this is going to take the longest part of the video because there are a few to share with you. I should get through the other parts more quickly, but I'm going to run through my square dies now, and I don't have that many. Again, I use the Simon Says stamp stitched squares a lot. I've got, as you can see, I'm forever using them. Again, the packaging needs replacing, but these are a really great set of dies. I think there's about 7 of them that cut various different squares. You've got the inside and outside stitching on that, and that's one of the cards that I created. It's tiny little, I really like square cards. I don't make them enough, but I do really like them. And this is just a little set of square cards that I made using some pre-coloured images, and you can see I've used one of the stitched squares in that. And then I picked up these actually only about 2 months ago. This is the largest set of squares from Lawn Fawn, and they're again they have the stitching detail, and I've picked them up mainly just because of this outer square, because it cuts 4 1/4, I think, or it might even be 4 1/2, yeah, 4 1/2 by 4 1/2, so it sits really nicely on a 5-inch square card. And I haven't actually used it yet, but I know that I'm going to use this a lot, as I do like my square cards, and I do want to be able to put a larger panel on them, and I haven't been able to do that so far. And then moving on to circles, I've got again the Simon Says stamp stitched circles here. One of my go-to sets. I've had these about 3 years. I invested in my stitch dies about 2 to 3 years ago. And I don't have all the different stitching. I don't have the wonky or the cross or the piercings. I have very few of those dies. It's mainly just the stitching that I went for. And so these I use, again, I use these a lot on my cards. And this is an example of one of the ones that I did recently, where I've cut the stitch circle there, and it's mounted up over my UPO panel, so it really adds a nice detail, I think, to that sort of square panel. So that was that card. And then I also invested in the Hero Art Circle Infinity dies. Again, similar to the rectangle dies, this is a brilliant investment, and this large die here it's one of the reasons I got it. So I saw Laura Basson do this most amazing circular card using this largest die, and although I haven't done a card that size yet, I do really like circular cards as well. So I've invested in these. They don't have the stitching, but again they have about 12 or 13 dies, so it makes them really good value. And I'll just show you a couple of the cards I made with those. Let me just bring that up to the camera, and you can see I've cut a little frame on that one there that just sits on top of the actual circular card, and that's one way that obviously you can use them again as a frame. And on this card here that I made very recently, I've just cut an aperture out of the side of the top panel, and there is some slight embossing around the edge as well, so that's just an extra little detail that you can add when using your dies. So it doesn't show up that well in the video, but you can see it when you actually see the card in real life. And then moving on to the Mama Elephant Frame Tag Columbus circle die. I bought this actually on a bit of a whim. I'd seen it used, I didn't have any scalloped circle dies, and I thought this was really pretty. It actually comes with two other parts to it as well. They're like little tags, and that looks like a little balloon. I keep them separately because they go with other dies, but this is the main sort of circular die. And I've seen it used in loads of different ways. It looks really good with shakers, and I've seen people use just bold sentiments in that and then something around the outside. I've used this on so many cards, so actually for a die that was bought on a whim, it's actually worked out really well. And that's one of my cards that I've made with it. Just very plain. It's got an alcohol ink background and a neat and tangled koala image on top, and I've used the larger of the lawn fawn stitched rectangles on that card as well, so really good investment that one was. And then my final shape die is actually my favourite thing, Stitched Arch STAX dies, and these I bought these again without giving loads of thought to it, but they've been a really good die for me. They have 6 dies of varying different sizes. I generally use the first 2 sizes on my cards. Really good set of dies. They do cut stitching, but it's on the inside of the cut line, so when you cut your aperture you don't get anything on the outside, and most of the time I actually really prefer that. I think for this card here it works really well because all the action's going on in this little bit here. So that was one card example for you. I did also create a shaker with this one, so again it's just on a square card this time, takes up a really nice proportion of that square panel. And again, I've got another one here, so you can see I really use these a lot. These are just the cards that I have left in my box. I mean, obviously I send a lot of cards out, so it does show you how much I use these dies. So that, again, I just created a little underwater scene with the otters. Again, it sits really nicely on the top part of the panel. So that takes you to the end of my basic shape dies. I do have some ovals, but I don't use them that often, so I'm not going to cover those, and I'm going to move on to cover dies in the next part of the video. Okay, so just moving on to cover-up dies. I don't have many cover-up dies. I haven't chosen to invest in them. There are a couple that I want, but I do have 2 to share with you, and I'm also going to cover tags in this part of the video. But I'm going to start with the My Favourite Things Snowdrifts cover-up die. I bought this because I actually think, although it says Snowdrifts cover-up, it can be used in so many different ways. I've seen loads of card examples where this is not used for snow, and that obviously that stretches the use of your die quite a lot. And these are not cheap. They're usually between £20 and £25 here in the UK, depending on where you buy them. Some of them might be a little bit less than that, but generally they're around that price point. So you really want to make sure that you get the use out of your cover-up dies. So I've just got 2 to share with you and a couple of examples. This one here, I've actually chosen to use the cutout pieces on my card. So I have created a little snow scene here. That's a watercolour background, and I've just stuck the cutout pieces on, and I doubled them up at the bottom here. Just to create a kind of bank of snow, but that's one way that you can use them, by just using the cutout pieces. And then the other way that you use them is by using the frame itself. So it just adds a little bit of interest. I'm not intending my hedgehogs to even be on snow, to be honest. When I made this card, I just wanted to have somewhere to stamp my sentiment, so I chose to put 2 of the white inserts back in there and just put the little hedgehogs over to the side. So it's not a snow card, but I have kept them white, and obviously you just have that extra detail from the cover die, which just adds something else to the top of the card. So I really love this cover up die. I have used it a lot, but only just have those 2 examples to share with you. And then this is the other cover up die that I really love. It's the lil'inker quilted stitched pattern, and I don't have an example to share with you, but I have got a video where I've used that, and I'll link to that at the end of this video so that you can see what it looks like. But it cuts a quilted stitched pattern as you'd expect, but I think it's quite subtle, so it's really nice as a background. You know, if you've got one image that you want to display on it. I've actually used it as the panel for an aperture card in my video, but I just really love that stitching, and lil'inker does lots of these, and there's quite a few of them that are still on my list, but I really need to have a look and see which other ones I think are going to be worth getting, that I'm going to get the use out of. So that again is one of my favourite cover dies. So that's just the 2 cover up dies. Then I'm just going to move on to the tags. And I do have about 3 sets of tag dies, but if I was to get 1 set of tag dies, if I was starting my crafty life right from the beginning, I would buy this set and this set only, because I think it does everything. Now this is from Clearly Besotted. It's called the Tag Along Die Collection, and I'm actually going to pull it out because there is much more to it than that first magnetic sheet. As you can see, you've actually got 3 large tag dies. You've got one with a scallop top, you've got a sort of straight edge top, and then a rounded edge as well. And then you get all these accessories with them. So you've got a heart, a bow, 2 sort of framed panels. You can cut little apertures out of the tags and put little images behind. These basically mean you can cut a banner shape at the bottom of the tag, or you can have a rounded part at the bottom of your tag. There's loads of examples of these on the Clearly Besotted website, and these are an investment. They're about £25, but I have to say I think that it is a fabulous set of dies, and you've just got so many options with them. In terms of how you use them. So I really love these, and I do make quite a few tags, but I just have only one in my supplies to share with you, and I made it to go with a card, and I didn't do anything fancy with the tag. I just used the scalloped tag die and the little circular piece that you put round where the thread goes, and I just stamped my image on. But there is a lot that you can do with them. I just don't have examples here for you, particularly because you can change the shape of them with these 2 extra bits, and also you can layer them up and actually use a top panel which has a rectangular opening or a square opening, or even the heart opening. So they're a fantastic set of dies. I really love them, and I would really recommend them if you haven't invested in tags and you're not sure which way to go. So that brings me to the end of this part of the video, and I'm going to move on next to my border dies. So I'll be back in a second with those. So just moving on now to border dies. Again, I've got a few to share with you here. I've sort of picked one from each area, like a cloud, a grass, that sort of thing. I do use border dies a lot. Again, there's lots of dies out there, so you really want to make sure that you choose wisely. And I don't think I have, apart from grass, any more than one set of any type of die, and I just use that set. So I bought the one set, I'm happy with it, and that's kind of as far as I'll probably go with it. So just showing you first of all the cloud edges. This is my favourite things, stitched cloud edges, lots of stitch dies again. I really love them. There's 3 in the set. They cut fantastic puffy cloud shapes. They're all different. Some of them are, you know, quite exaggerated puffy clouds, and some of them are a little bit more subtle, so you get a bit of a sort of flatter, you don't get so much of a height in it, but they're really, really fabulous. They cut the stitching both sides, so you get some on the positive and the negative part of your panel. So I really love those. This is an example of one of the cards I made recently with it. I've got a little dragon there. This is also from my favourite things, and I decided to cut a cloud border for him to sit on, and I cut a vellum piece underneath, and I think it just looks really nice when you layer them up with vellum. I could have used a different shape die, but I thought it would look nice if they matched and they sort of flowed together really. So that was my first example, or my only example actually, with the cloud dies. And moving on to the waves dies, this is a Mama Elephant set. This is called Ocean Waves Trio. Again, it's got 3 dies. It cuts 3 different types of wave, so you get quite a lot of variety in that set, and I've got a couple of examples for you. I've actually cut some vellum, and I've cut a sort of turquoise panel here for my fish, and I did put some glitter on the vellum. Again, I've layered them up. That's a really nice way to use these dies, and I've used a different shaped die for the front and to the back, so there is some variety in the way that the waves go. So that was my first card, and then I've also got another card here where I've used them just on vellum. So I've got 2 different types of vellum, and from memory I actually coloured my vellum, and I do have a video showing how I did this card, so I'll link to that at the end. And so that is just another way of using them across an aperture. I haven't used them across the whole width of the card, but a really, really good set of dies. And then I've got the Lawn Fawn stitched hillside borders, and I don't have an example to share with you where I've used them as a hillside, but I have used them in a slightly different way on this card. So I've used them to create a separate kind of area for me to stamp the butterflies that are all flying up sort of towards the top of the card. So that's actually a stitched a stitched hillside, and so is that. So it's a really good way of stretching your dies. They don't have to be used for hillsides, they can be used in other ways. And then I've got a set here which is the Garden Fence die collection. This is from Clearly Besotted, and it has the big fence die, but it has 2 grass dies in it as well. And this is my kind of go-to set for grass. I have one other set from, I think it's from My Favourite Things, but I do really like the 2 different sizes of grass that you can get in that, and they're also not really pointy. So sometimes I find with the more kind of pointy grass dies, which is what My Favourite Things are, they can often get turned up a little bit. It's hard to stick those down, or if you're using foam tape on them, they can often get a little bit curled. So in some ways it's nicer that the actual spikes of the grass don't stand up too much. So that's my favourite grass set. That's an example. I showed you this one earlier when I showed you this, and I've got 2 little layers of the grass there, so I think that it does look nice when you layer them up. You could have actually used the 2 different sizes there, but I chose not to. And then this set here is my Snowdrifts set, but only Snowdrifts border dies that I have. They fairly self-explanatory. This is the example of the card that I've got where I use them, and I've just added a little bit of glitter on the top there, and I think they're just really pretty. It stretches the whole of the panel, whether you're going to use it horizontal or vertically, but I've just actually cut a little bit off there and sat it within a scalloped frame. And then lastly, for my border dies, this is my Stitched Basic Edges die set, and it's a very basic set, as you would expect. I don't have an example to show you, but it cuts 4 different edges to your card, so you can have a round one, a less rounded one. It has a sort of diagonal kind of cut off one. I don't know what you would call that, but it cuts a sort of diagonal at the bottom, and then you've got one that does a similar thing, but it would just have the point in the middle of the card, so the sort of pointed part of the panel in the middle of the card. So I use those quite a lot, and again I like the stitching on them. It has the stitching on both sides of the cut line, so they're a really good value set. I'm going to move on next to my sentiment dies, so I will be back in a second with those for you. Right, okay, I'm just going to cover my sentiments fairly quickly, I hope. This was really hard for me because I buy a lot of sentiment dies. They're generally not that expensive, and the variety is huge in sentiment dies, with the size of the actual die cut itself and the font as well, never mind all the different types of sentiments you can actually have. So generally when I buy them, I think about the type of cards that I most likely send, and I generally send birthday, thank you, or just general hello type friendship cards. So I try to make sure that when I buy a sentiment die, it's going to work on that kind of card. So I'm going to just kick off. This is a Mama Elephant friend die. I absolutely love this die. I've had this for about 3 years. I really like the font of this, and I'm going to show you a cutout and the size of it against an A2 card. So it's a really pretty font, and it fits really nicely on an A2 card. So that's one of my go-to dies, and it says friends, so it fits lots of different cards. I've also got 2 dies here from Simon Says Stamp. One of them is called the Small Hello, and one of them is the Painted Hello, and I'll just get those out and show you those as well. They are completely different fonts. As you can see, you've got the much more heavy font at the top and a much prettier sort of scripty font for the bottom one, but I use both of these a lot, and the word hello goes on lots of different cards, so they're one of my most used sets of dies. I also really love the Winnie and Walter cutout dies. They do several of them. I've got a hello, I've got a Noel, I think I've got a hugs one as well. They're really inexpensive. They're about £5, which is great value. It might even be $5 I can't remember. You have to go onto I'm going to link to everything below in the description anyway, in case you want to look for them, and over on my blog. But they are very inexpensive, so I do have 3 or 4 of these dies, and this is an example of one of the cards that I made with the hello die. I actually made a shaker card with it, and it's quite difficult to see on camera, but you have got the cutout there. It looks really pretty with the sequins behind. So I haven't used it for a while, and it's a really nice reminder that I need to go ahead and use that again. And you can see here it looks really pretty. That's how it cuts out. That's the positive of a card that I sent a while back. I kept that just in case I wanted to use that on another card. And I've also got the Mama Elephant hello there. That's another beautiful font from Mama Elephant, and that almost stretches the whole width of a card, so it looks really good across an aperture. I've used that across a circular aperture before, and that's also a fantastic die. I've got the My Favourite Things. This is the Big Hello die. I've only used this a couple of times, but I really need to use this more, but I do like it. It's one of my favourite dies because I like the font and I like the size. And that's an example of the card that I made with that. As you can see, it really is the sort of star of the show of the card, and it fits really nicely on a square panel, and it would also fit really well on an A2 panel. So that's that one there. The Winnie and Walter High die is amazing. I don't have an example to show you, and it's a bit difficult to... I should have this against a different colour background, but it cuts a really big high, which you can use the positive or negative. I've used it both ways. I've had the cutaway part that I've had stenciling behind, and you can also just to use that over a background as well. It's a brilliant size. It's really quite large, and it makes a real statement. So one of my favourite dies. And then I've got the Simon Says Stamp Love die, which I waited for ages to buy this die, and I don't have an example to show for you, but I showed this in a haul video a few months ago, and it cuts the love and then the shadow as well. So you can see here it's a really beautiful font. It's quite delicate, but it stacks up really nicely against either a vellum shadow or just a more solid shadow. So I've used that one loads of times as well. That was a really good investment. One of my favourite dies ever, I think. And then I had to share this one with you. I've got it in the stamp set because it actually matches the U in the stamp set. This is the Simon Says Stamp U Matter. One of my most used sentiment sets, but it has a die that cuts the U exactly the same, and I really love that. I've used it on, I don't know, maybe 15 cards, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is quite a lot when you have lots of sentiments to choose from. So it's definitely worth getting. It's a really good size, and I keep lots of them cut in the back of the packet there. I just have a little session where I die cut them, and so I have them ready there for when I want to use them. It's a really lovely font and a great size on the card. And I'm just going to share this last one. I've only got it last year. It was a fantastic price. It was about £3.50, and it's the My Favourite Things Joy die. So it's a Christmas die, and I've got two cards with it here. It doesn't cut a shadow. It doesn't have a shadow die with it, but I actually put it on some black cardstock and cut a shadow myself, and I think that looks really nice against that background. And it's a really pretty die. I fell in love with it when it came out last year, and for the price I really thought that was such a good investment, and I used it on several of my Christmas cards. You can see it again here, so it gives you an idea of the size, because this is an A2 size card. So very, very pretty, and I'm sure I'm going to be using that a lot this year. And then just finally to talk about letters, I only have one letters set of dies, and this is it, the Mama Elephant inline letters. You can obviously create your own name, so you can personalise a card with it. I keep all the spares in the back there, and I do go to those first before I recut them, but sometimes it's more of a hassle to find them than it is to actually just die cut them from scratch. But I really love the size of these, and it's a very sort of good font for both masculine and feminine cards. So I'm just going to finish off in the next part of the video with my coordinating and just a few miscellaneous dies. So not many more to go. Thank you for bearing with me, and I'll be back in a second with those for you. Right, so I'm back with the last of my dies. I'm just going to talk a bit about coordinating dies. I actually own very few coordinating dies. I generally don't buy them unless I get a set where there is really complicated or really sort of intricate stamps, often ones where there's lots of kind of leaves and petals and things that are not necessarily easy to fussy cut out. I sometimes buy them on those sets, but generally I'm not a big coordinating die. It's not that I'm not a fan of them. I think they're fantastic, but they are an investment, so I usually think twice about whether I get them. And what I mostly wanted to say about coordinating dies is that sometimes you forget that there's actually little dies in those sets that are really, really useful. And I've got a set here which is the Seen It die collection from Clearly Besotted, which cuts the it coordinates with the actual Seen It stamp set, but it has this little cloud die in it, so you forget that these dies are often there. And it's getting lost a little bit against the background here, but you know, I guess it's just to encourage you to look at all parts of your dies, because you mostly would just look at that and you forget that you've actually got this little cloud one there as well, which might be quite useful on another card. That's the set that it actually goes with, so it cuts out the trees or the water or the mountains, but there's the little cloud stamp that matches that die. But of course you can just cut that as a normal cloud itself. And I've got the Mama Elephant Charmed set here, and I do have the coordinating dies for this, and I just wanted to show this as an example because I actually don't have any banner dies at all, and this does come with a banner die, which is here at the back here. So you could actually, you know, obviously mixing and matching your sets is always a good idea, but I don't keep them to just use with this set. So look at your coordinating dies and also your stamps as well, and see how else you can use them. But you could actually just die cut the banner from white cardstock. You don't even have to stamp the outline image on top, but you know, you could just put a sentiment on a plain white banner and that would still look really nice. And there's also a cute little heart in this set as well, which has a coordinating die at the back, and I don't have one that size, so you just never really know what's in these sets. And so I've mostly pointed them out for you to just sort of show you that there are useful little dies in some of those sets that can be used in other ways. So I'm just going to move on now to the final part of the video, and this is just miscellaneous dies that I really use all the time. I've used these such a lot, all of these dies that I'm going to show you. And the first one is the mini heart set, and this just cuts there's three different shape hearts in this set, and they're three different sizes, and I have a bunch of them cut in red and pink at the back, and I also have some cut in white which I can colour according to my project. And I use these on absolutely loads of cards. You've seen several of the cards today already. I've used one there, I've used one there, I've used one on this card. I just use them all the time. They're very, very useful, very inexpensive, and a great thing to have in your stash, just to add that tiny little bit of embellishment onto a scene. I think, you know, particularly in these two, it just gives a little pop of colour against the rest of the card. And then I've got this Avery Elle bookmark die. Again, I've used this, I probably have used this 20 or 30 times. It was about £8 or £9, I think. It also cuts out a heart, a circle, or a little sort of square frame. I've never actually used that part of the die. I just normally cut and stamp and colour the bookmark, and I personalise these. So I use a stamp set that I've got from Fawn, and I put it has very narrow letters, and I usually put the person's name on the top there. So this has been a brilliant buy for me, because it's really nice to make little bookmarks as gifts for people. I've got the Paper Smooches Cute Clouds here. Don't have a card example to share with you. There's three different size clouds here, a larger one and two slightly, they're more or less the same size but a slightly different shape. I use them a lot. I have a bunch of them cut already in the back of the packet in case I need them. The zipper mechanism, this is a zipper die from Mama Elephant, and I bought this couple of years ago maybe. I really like doing interactive cards. A really good price point. I think it was about £3 or £4, so very inexpensive. And I do have a card here. I can't actually show you the zipper as I don't want to spoil the card, but you can pull the tab open there and it reveals the secret message behind. So I actually made this as one of my Christmas cards last year and didn't get to send it out. So that was using the zipper die, which is a really good die to have in your set and really easy to use as well. So I've used that one a lot. Almost last, I've got the Simon Says Stamp Village set, and this I mostly use on Christmas cards, but you can use it for any time of the year actually. There's no reason why not. And it actually cuts, you don't have a cut line across the bottom of the die, so I don't have an example where I can show you, but you can actually cut kind of continual seam with those because it doesn't cut the bottom part of the die off. And it's a really lovely set, 3 different houses and 2 trees, and I've used it in this one here where I've actually just cut them separately and stuck them on. As I said, don't have one which shows them as a continual kind of scene itself, but I love that set and I've used it so many times. Paper Smooches Stars, brilliant set of star dies. Cuts the big star, cuts kind of, you can see it more easily here, it just sort of cuts the outline of the star, it cuts different solid stars. It's a really good set to have. I've used that all the time. I have some in the back there that I just have waiting to go on a card, but I really love that set. Again, fairly inexpensive, about £7 or £8 I think when I bought it, and I've used it a lot. And then just moving on to my last set, so thank you for bearing with me. I know this video's been quite long, but I hope it's useful. This is my go-to butterfly set, and these are both from Memory Box. One of them is called the Vivian butterfly, that's on the left there. The other one is called the Dala butterfly, and they actually fit, they work together. So you've got the solid and then you've got the much more intricate die, so you can use them separately or you can use them together. And I've got some in the back here that I've coloured up, and I haven't put them on a card yet, but you can see how pretty that is. It's a really beautiful die. It's my go-to butterfly die, and it's just well worth the investment for me. I've used it, I don't know, loads and loads of times. I don't have a solid one to show you, but you know, it's the same shape, and of course you can layer them up as well. So I really love that. So that brings me to the end of my video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to link to everything in my YouTube description below and over on my blog, the sets that I've shown you today. I won't have pictures of the cards, but if you visit my blog, many of them are featured over on my blog. I will link to Corinne, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, as it was her idea to share her favourite dies as part of her Ride or Dies video. And it's really fun to watch Corinne. She has a very unique style and she's very entertaining, so hop on over and watch her video and I'm sure you'll be hooked, because she really does produce some really lovely cards as well. And that just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching again, and I'm going to link to a few videos which you might find useful. If you like the video, please hit the subscribe button, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.